Hi, welcome to Abington News and Views. I'm Paul Mamelo, and today we have with us Brendan Boyle. He's the Pennsylvania State Representative for District 170. Welcome to Abington News and
thank
Views.
you. Thank you for having me.
Brendan, if you could first define for our viewers a little bit where your district covers.
Right. Well, I have one of the most gerrymandered districts in the nation, let alone the state. So it's a little bit complicated. My district, it's shaped like the letter C. But essentially, in Montgomery County, I represent a portion of Abington Township, the Huntington Valley part that's in Abington Township. Also represent the borough of Rockledge. And then in far northeast Philadelphia, some neighborhoods that are adjoining Montgomery County, like Somerton, Bustleton, Pine Valley, Fox Chase, and Burholm.
Would all of your district be in Allison Schwartz congressional district?
That would make things much easier, but unfortunately that's not the case. The majority of my district is in Allison Schwartz's district, which is the 13th, but then about a third of it, the part that borders Bucks County, is in Patrick Murphy's
Oh, I see. As you
congressional
move
district.
further north.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then, as you know, we're Abington News and Views.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about how what happens in your district affects our viewers in the rest of Abington, and some of the things that might spill over for our viewers.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that actually representing a district that is part of the city, but also part of the suburbs, to me, I think gives me a unique perspective. And then when I'm in the legislature, I need to balance both portions of my district. And I actually think that that's a good thing and a healthy thing for representative democracy, because it makes one branch out and consider issues from different points of view. Although I have to say, on most issues, I think that the part of the city that I represent, which is largely residential in nature, and then the part of Montgomery County that I represent are actually more similar than they are dissimilar.
Mm-hmm. But we were talking a little bit about the differences in cultures between the suburban political entities and in the city. How different things can be.
That certainly is the case. I mean, the city of Philadelphia, I think more than maybe any other big city in the country, has a very, and I say this as a born and raised and proud Philadelphian, unfortunately the political culture in Philadelphia has not always encouraged a new generation of leadership, has not always been warm to the idea of change, to innovating, to maybe going more in a direction of modernizing than it should be. And I think for a long time Philadelphia has paid a price. We see it now and over the last year in the BRT problem, where in the suburbs you have a pretty good system for assessing values of properties. You have that in almost every major city in the country. But in Philadelphia, with a very patronage-laden system, they have one of the worst systems in the country for assessing property values. So there is a real cost to a political culture that is too wedded to the past.
Now, you were born and raised in your district. I know you're a native Philadelphian, right?
Born and raised in the Olney neighborhood of Philadelphia. Grew up there. Actually, my high school and college job when I would come home for the summer was working at the old Heckinger on Old York Road in Jenkintown. So my first working experience was Montgomery County, and worked there for about 3 or 4 years. And so I grew up in the city, went to high school at Cardinal Dougherty, then went away for college, University of Notre Dame, and went away for graduate school, worked for a number of years in Washington, D.C., and when I moved back home, came back home to Philadelphia.
So then you left Philadelphia, went to Notre Dame, as you mentioned, and then Harvard School of Law?
School of Government, yeah. I went to Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government, and 2-year program, master's degree in public policy.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about what you learned while you were out there and how that influenced your life to move you into the position that you're in now.
Yeah, much of what I studied at the Kennedy School is directly applicable to the work that I do now. In fact, a number of the issues that I studied have literally turned into legislative ideas that I've written. It was a great experience, and it's absolutely the kind of grounding that I think one should have if they're dealing with a budget the size of the state government, which is $28 billion. The sort of issues that we deal with, whether it's criminal justice or health policy or education policy, all sorts of issues, and those were the sorts of policy areas that I studied in graduate school, and it's been enormously helpful to my job.
And that sort of background, I would assume, also helps you with the structure of the legislature, how bills are, the process and things like that.
Yeah, that's also been helpful, especially because a number of the faculty at Harvard's Kennedy School were former members of Congress or former members of some sort of legislature. So that certainly did help. Although there is no substitute for actually being in the job yourself and learning the way things really work and just how long it takes for any piece of legislation to get passed. You have to go through jump through so many hoops and go through so many rings. It does take quite a while. Even if it's a good idea, I had a piece of legislation that in the end passed unanimously, but that obscures the fact that it really took 10 months to get passed and must have met with probably about 50 to 60 different people or entities from the time I started until the time it became law.
So it meets all the opposition at first that slows it down,
right?
But eventually it works its way through the process and then passed.
That's exactly right. And I had the bill that I'm talking about was my full survivor's benefit for police and firefighters. That's the example that I'm thinking of that took 10 months to get passed, and in the end was passed unanimously. But early on, certain groups wanted language expressed in a different way. One member who's on a committee might have a different issue, so you attempt to meet with him and address his concerns, and meet with another colleague and attempt to work on her language. So it was really a collaborative effort, and in our legislative process between House Democrats, House Republicans, Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, governor's administration, outside groups, like in this case the Fraternal Order of Police and State Firefighters Association and other law enforcement associations. It really does take a long time to get something done. And to someone who is still relatively new, this is still my first term, that can be a little frustrating, but it's also rewarding at the end of that process when the bill is finally signed into law.
And the fact that you've had bills go all the way through, many freshman legislators don't have that experience right away. So.
Yeah, well, and thank you. It was a lot of hard work, but I'm glad. And in the end, it was all worth it. And the thing that I've really learned from my first 2 years in office is that if you want to get a bill passed, you have to have tenacity. You have to have persistence. You just have to stick with it and be willing to meet anyone who has an issue with the legislation. That doesn't necessarily mean totally agreeing with them, but if you're willing to meet with someone who initially puts up resistance or just has questions, you eventually either address those concerns or wear them down to the point where they see that you're just going to keep coming, and eventually they relent.
Let them figure out a way to like it, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, actually, that's what I'd like to do is talk to you about specific legislation that you've worked on. You have a strong repertoire of things that you've been working on in your first term, and I'd like to talk about those in detail. And maybe we actually will start out with the first responders legislation that you sponsored, that you were just talking about. I'd like to get more details on that, but we have to take a short break, so we'll be right back.